When you view an infotext, webinar, or movie, you do so with 4 caveats. First, you are agreeing to the terms posted at the webpage listed on this slide. Second, our lawyers want you to know that what infotext presents is often time-dated or about new trends, regulations, or guidance, and therefore we cannot provide this material with any warranty whatsoever. Thirdly, material provided with infotext webinars and movies is copyrighted. You keep the copyright to material customized to your organization, but Infotext reserves the right to use the material in other engagements and boilerplates. See our Transfer of Copyright Agreement at the web page listed in the slide. Finally, those who view our webinars or movies may be added to an email mailing list. If you do not wish to receive notice of additional educational opportunities, please accept our apologies and please opt out at the web page shown on the slide.
Hey, Dan Hadaway here, founder of Infotext, and I'm dressed as Cowhand Dan today because I wanted to introduce an article that I'm working on right now. I'm not even done with it, and I want to introduce it because I'm kind of excited about it. It's called I Was Raised on a Farm, and it's going to reflect upon the similarities and differences about the beginning of my career compared to the next phase of my career, where I turn the management of Infotext over to the next generation. So look for it. It's called I Was Raised on a Farm.
Hello everybody, my name is Michael Harkey. I'm the curator of code here at Infotext and your moderator. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. And now, I'd like to introduce the speaker of today's event, the awareness guru from Indiana, the breaker of tech and enforcer of policy. He has 13 letters after his name and they all spell risk management. Dan Hadaway. Dan?
Thank you very much, Michael, and thank you everybody for joining us. It's been a while since I've done webinars, and I'm really excited about this one. It's actually based on a talk that I gave, about 2 or 3 months ago about out-of-wallet questions. And while I was getting ready to give that talk, I was listening to an examiner panel at this conference that I spoke at. And one of the examiners talked about how in cybersecurity, the bad guys only have to win once, and the good guys are always playing for a tie. And I'm thinking, we can break that tie. I mean, it was really to address the subject of what are we going to do about the threat of state actors, not only Russia with, the Ukrainian thing going on, and this is, I'm recording this in early May 2022 for the sake of, pinpointing something that's such a fluent moving, target there and nailing it down. But at this point in time, we still don't see any activity from nation states other than what we've been seeing for years and years when we're watching the seam. Yes, the inherent risk is higher. I've been maintaining for a while that because of the wonderful controls that the FFIEC and the federal government, quite frankly, has insisted that smaller community-based banks put into place, our residual risk isn't that much higher now than it was before the nation state. Other than, from a black swan perspective, if there's some reason they want to target a particular bank, it's a good reason why Zero Trust preaches that we should, assume breach, act as if we've already been breached, because if a nation state does come after us, that paradigm might lower the impact of a breach anyway. But that's not what this talk is about. This talk is about, hey, we're community-based banks, and we don't have to accept the notion of a tie. We can actually win. Now, I'm not really meaning any, disrespect or in any way am I knocking the metaphor that the examiner used. Quite frankly, I thought it was a great metaphor. And I've heard it before, the whole notion that, they only have to succeed once and we have to be right every single time. The whole notion of cybersecurity is a tie. We don't have to accept that because of the fact that we're community-based banks. And you see, the examiner panel question, this particular part of that panel, was about the whole notion that we're being attacked by nation states now. And that in itself is why I think that metaphor made a good metaphor. And by the way, what I really want to reflect on is what the examiner said, which is at this point, the best we can do right now is just heighten our awareness. And you know that I believe awareness is 9/11's at a battle, and therefore that's what caught my attention. That's what had me zoomed in on this part of the talk. And the metaphor I loved, and I thought it really worked well in this realm. But circling back around, we're community-based banks. We're different than every other organization in America because we've been working on cybersecurity issues very, very hard now for more than 2 decades. Whereas most organizations are still waking up to the need. And that's why I named this talk Breaking the Tie, turning the opposite of productivity into a service and a message. And I don't usually spend this much time dwelling on my, cleverly crafted talk titles. But I also wanted to kind of bring this up as well because for years and years now, we've been hearing from people that are trying to get their job done and that are irritated because they just want to get their job done, that security is the opposite of productivity. And we've learned to be very careful about the controls that we might require from our users because we realize that, taking our shoes off in an airport is inconvenient. And we've learned that if we explain why we need to take our shoes off in the airport, it's still inconvenient, but people are more willing to participate with the process, and the lines aren't as long now as they used to be in the early days of responding to 9/11. And so now I will have to say, back to that examiner panel, one of the areas where I took a little bit of umbrage is, the whole notion that training is not a good control. I think, and this was actually a different examiner panel, I heard someone from the OCC say, I'm not a fan of training as a control. And I'm thinking, really? I mean, we have to heighten our awareness. Training is a very important control. I get it. Training is it's definitely not ones and zeros. It's very gray. But it's still an extremely important control. It's what sets community-based banks apart, their awareness. Their awareness began in about 2003 when they first started internet banking. And it's been heightening and heightening and heightening ever since. Awareness and awareness alone is what sets us apart, and it's what we can use to break the tie. This is what a regulator said. This is what I believe it was a large Fortune 500 infrastructure business said about training. This is what an accounting firm that had decided that, hey, we can do cybersecurity too. And from an auditor's perspective, how do you test training? That's a good reservation that someone might have on the surface. But what we have going for us is we're community-based banks. And just recently, a member of our federal government called each of us, and I work with banks. Our company watches bank networks, and so we got the call too because we're in what's called the FFIEC's TSP examination program, meaning that, we get examined on a regular basis. They review our audit reports, all that kind of stuff. And when they're worried about the Ukrainians, they call us up and they say, hey, you need to heighten your awareness because of Russia. And that's a call I took from our examiner in charge. It was a good call. I thought it was great because I do believe that we should heighten our awareness. That's about the only thing we can do right now. But what I want to point out here is that the same people, or the same, type of people that are saying they're not really, a fan of training as a control, are saying, when the question is, what should we do about the nation state? Well, you need to heighten your awareness. Training is a control. I disagree with the notion that training is not a control. And the reason why is because Infotex is, as a company, we turned old enough to drink in 2021. We've been around for 22 years watching incidents. We watch networks, and therefore we've seen a lot of incidents, some of them ugly, some of them not so ugly. Some incidents we've watched, we've been able to watch our clients turn lemons into lemonades. We have clients that have customers come into the branch and give their branch employees kudos for the way they've responded to incidents. But the one thing we've seen again and again and again and again is that awareness has a huge impact on the veracity of the organization's ability to turn an incident from a lemon into lemonades. And so over those 22 years, I've started referring to small community-based banked information security officers as cybersecurity superheroes. Joe and Jane ISO is our metaphor. And we use a lot of metaphors in our talks. If you haven't seen them before, get ready. But suffice it to say that while we are all rolling out remote access because banks are what is called laggard adopters of technology that increases risk, and so when the pandemic hit, not a lot of banks had the ability for their employees to go home. And right in the middle of all that, small financial institutions accounted for less than 1% of the data that was lost. And by the way, government and all those people that are saying, I'm not a fan of training as a control, well, they fall in that 99% category of other institutions. This guy has caused community-based banks to distinguish themselves from government, the rest of the critical infrastructure, the utility companies, the transportation system, the other industries that are considered to be critical infrastructure. They are not as secure as banks, because we've been concerned about Hacker Guy since the day we put the ability to transact money on the internet, which for most community-based banks was somewhere between 2003 and 2005. And thus in 2006, the FFIEC, thankfully, and I'm going to criticize them in a minute here, so I want to butter them up a little bit first maybe, but thankfully, they have put community-based banks into a position where our information security people and our IT people in general, and really community-based bankers as a whole, are cybersecurity superheroes. And so I just like to kind of go over the metaphorical characters that I use to represent a typical bank, starting with this character here. We call her Percy Nell. She's a typical bank employee. She wants to follow policy. I mean, she's Percy Nell. She's written some of the policies, right? But she prioritizes politeness just a little bit more than following policy. And Hacker Guy knows this, and he knows where Percy Nell's buttons are, and he has no problem pressing those buttons and taking advantage of her to get her to not follow policies and procedures. Meanwhile, you might recognize Joan here. She's one of the heroes of the pandemic. She's the reason why PPP worked. Joan Department is the multitasker of the bank, not just the loan person, but it could be the IT person, it could be the teller. All Americans multitask. And Hacker Guy knows that. And he knows that he doesn't even have to know where Joan's buttons are because she's proud to be talking on the phone, reading email, and watching one of, Dan's webinars all at the same time. And Hacker Guy takes advantage of that and gets Joan to bypass controls, to not follow policy or procedure. And that's how Hacker Guy can become an advanced persistent threat on our network. And I'll show you some examples of that real soon here. Mark Edding, you recognize Mark. He's the guy that, by golly, we're not going to inconvenience our customers. And I'm using the Nicolas Cage thing here. Over security, the opposite of productivity, right? That's Nicolas Cage. I mean, that's Mark Edding. And just so you know, Mark Edding's pushback has been important. He's the one that taught us that if he understands why, he's more than happy to take his shoes off in the airport, even if his customers are standing behind him in line. And we cannot disregard Mark Edding's pushback because he is right. We should not inconvenience our customers over something like security unless we help them understand why. And we're a bank. The why is inherent in our existence. We started long time ago, some of us more than 100 years ago, to keep our customers and their money and their information safe. And if we can help Mark Edding understand that security is our service, Mark Edding will be more apt to implement the controls that he has to implement, or we're not protecting our customers. Then, of course, there's Joe and Jane ISO, and I've already talked about them. I am very proud of our clients, and any person in any community-based bank or credit union that's fighting the fight that, quite frankly, is helping the Western world contain Russia right now, in my opinion. Now, this person here, Margaret the Target, is not really a member of the bank, or she could be if the bank hires her. We are concerned that sometimes banks would hire an employee who's just that breach waiting to happen. But tellers in banks, they recognize Margaret. She's the cat lady. Every teller can tell the story of the old lady that comes into the bank. She goes into the safe deposit area and she counts her money. And boy, that woman must be wealthy. And we worry about Margaret the Target because she truly is a target. The elderly suffer from abuse, not only from strangers, but also their own family members. Margaret the Target is somebody that we need to make sure we're protecting, and we need to try not to hire her. No offense to cat ladies. And then finally, there's Bill 2K, who's also a customer. He's that customer who's not really that interested in protecting his identity until he loses it, and then he looks for someone to blame. Back to Dan using metaphors. I mean, all those characters you'll see in this talk as metaphors for, various members of our bank and their vulnerabilities that Hacker Guy likes to take advantage of. But I also want you to know that this talk is based on trend analysis that I did back in 2021, and really a series of talks that I did. It's kind of an annual thing for me. It started off as an article, and I call it the Magnificent Seven. And during the pandemic, people were so tired of virtual events that I found myself asking people to imagine what would happen if, when the management team shined the bat signal that, hey, we need the information security people to come in and help us write our technology plan, what trends should we consider? If when the management team shunned that bat signal, a couple of cowboys showed up, well, now you've got my Magnificent Seven metaphor, right? And so I gave this talk about the top 7 trends in banking information security, and it was really based on the Western theme. I used this belt buckle down here instead of our normal footer. And one of the trends that I announced in this talk I gave as late as, and we updated, by the way, in 2022, but I gave this talk in April and I gave it of 2021, and I also gave this talk in October of 2020, and I gave this talk in November of 2020. And so I'm kind of proud of the fact, and I'm kind of, doing a rain dance on the fact, or, doing a high five on the fact that my sixth trend that I predicted that we're all going to need to start looking at zero trust was actually pointed to in the Architecture, Infrastructure, and Operations guidance that was published on June 30th, 2021. So bam, we did a good job of predicting that trend. And you might be thinking, well, who cares? Isn't this supposed to be about breaking some tie or whatever, right? Well, I care because, quite frankly, I didn't do so well on trend number 7. I thought trend number 7 was kind of a no-brainer. I basically put forth that we are going to start applying awareness in all directions, that, I had to cancel a workshop that was scheduled for, September 12th, 2001. And I've been saying ever since that awareness is 9/11 set a battle. I know some of us that watch this are not old enough to remember 9/11, but we were far more secure the day after September 11th than we were the day before. I talked about how there's 3 interactive processes that we as small community-based banks implement without even knowing sometimes, to help accentuate and heighten awareness that, if the word came down from our examiner in charge that we should heighten our awareness, we might be telling our employees that, hey, go read your acceptable use policy, and remember the reason why, the motivate part is really, we need to make sure people understand why these controls are in place, because that makes it much easier for them to engage with them and learn how to use the controls. Their habits, their disciplines, they're not always easy to use. And we need to activate our awareness. And the reason why I know that's so important is because twice in my career, one of the people watches these movies still, but twice in my career, once a male and once a female, they both have retired since. But the person who hired Infotex to do social engineering testing failed the social engineering test. One was a pretext calling test. Another one was a phishing test. And we knew that they were educated and motivated. I mean, they were paying money for us to attack them, but they were not activated. They weren't on guard. They didn't realize that we were going to come after them too. I mean, I felt they thought that was kind of audacious, but they agreed that, hey, we need to activate our own awareness as well. And all of us lose our activation over time, but we do need to have the ability to heighten awareness by activating awareness. Now, there's a lot of different ways. I went over this. I'm not going to go into it too much. You should watch that movie if you want to know what I mean here. But I want to point out here that I also basically started talking about the fact that, hey, we've got clients that have been doing ongoing pretext calls, just like you're now doing ongoing phishing, is what we used to call it before KnowBe4 came out with their application, and PhishMe, and there's several other applications you can use to phish your own employees. And we put forth, and have been putting forth for years now, the notion that if every time an employee answers the phone, it could be a test, that employee is going to learn how to ask what we call out-of-wallet questions. And out-of-wallet questions are a control that all bank employees should understand and know how to use. But this is where the kind of an embarrassment comes, because we used to have a little bit of teeth in that. The supplement to the authentication guidance way back in 2011, defined out-of-wallet questions as a control that could be used to verify people's identity, and especially pretext callers, or, people calling, asking for information that they may or may not have access to, all depending on who they are. And so out-of-wallet questions is kind of an IAM thing, an identity and access management thing that was called for in the guidance in 2011. Unfortunately, though, 4 months after my prediction that we were going to apply awareness in all directions, and part of that prediction was that your employees, if they haven't already done so yet, they need to learn out-of-wallet questions. Well, they updated that authentication guidance. They made it really clear that this replaces the 2 previous guidances on the subject, and there's no mention whatsoever of out-of-wallet questions. I feel kind of like Homer Simpson. I felt like saying "doh" when I read that guidance. And I also became concerned about the fact that a lot of banks are still not convinced that they should learn how to use out-of-wallet questions as a control. There's a lot of reasons why you should do that. It helps us break the tie. I will promise you I will be getting to that soon. But before I do want to point out that it wasn't that long ago. As a matter of fact, it was in March of 2022 that Tripwire wrote an article about the top 5 social engineering attacks. And when they said pretexting, they should have said pretext calling, because if you ask me, all of this is pretexting. But number 2 was the pretext call. And the pretext call is how we can break the tie. Because when we call our hospital, they ask us what our birthday is, right? Healthcare still hasn't gotten the why. When we call a Fortune 500 company, oh my God, we're lucky if they ask us any kind of authenticating questions. But when we call a bank, up until August of last year, the bank was required to ask us peculiar questions that were meant for your protection. I mean, is there a connection there? If you ask me, for your protection is really the service that banks offer. Banks are in the business of for your protection. Banks were started back in the days of Jesse James, and they thrived in the days of John Dillinger for your protection. It's really the part of our marketing message, if we use it properly, that our customers really count on. It's the part of our marketing message that directly impacts our customers. They don't put their money in a mattress, they put it in a bank. It's for their protection that we exist. And we have an attack vector that is real. Forget what Tripwire said about it. They're not in the banking industry. You know this is happening on a regular basis. You know that people are calling up and getting account balances on your employees. On their customers that they shouldn't have. It could be part of elderly abuse. It could be part of somebody trying to figure out how much they need to offer for a building. And so they want to know what the person's paying in their loan. There's a lot of reasons why people call and ask for information they're not entitled to, and it's the bank's job to stop that from happening. But more importantly than that is the fact that over the years, we've learned, the people who work with Infotechs, that pretext calling as a test kills a lot of birds with one stone, and it helps us break the tie. Now, I'm not here giving this talk because I want to sell anybody a pretext calling engagement. We only have a certain number of people to do it. Your audit firm can already do pretext calling for you. It's my understanding that KnowBe4 has a solution. If you're already using KnowBe4, it makes sense to look into that. But what I really want to make sure that you understand is that if we could tell our employees every time you answer a phone, it could be a test, now we're substantially activating awareness, not just on the pretext calling vector, but across the board. You saw this when you implemented PhishMe or whatever phishing application you have now in your bank. You saw that not only did it make people more wise about the whole phishing attack vector and what we need to do to mitigate that, but it activated our awareness across the board. We did better on password file analysis tests. We did better in our pretext calling tests because our awareness was activated. If you think about that, awareness is 9/11 to the battle, and the whole notion that we were far more secure the day after 9/11 than the day before. What had changed? Yeah, we were educated now. Hey, there's bad guys out there wanting to kill us. We had understood the why, right? I mean, almost 3,500 people lost their lives, but our awareness was activated for at least a month when a month later, American citizens, not law enforcement, American citizens tackled a guy in a Detroit airport because it looked like he had a bomb in his shoes, right? That was awareness activated. Activating our awareness is what the regulators called us up about when it came to how we were going to respond to Ukraine. Now, there's two different kinds of pretext calling tests that can be done, and I encourage you to do both, and I strongly encourage you to get a journal of the test results as well as ask your tester, and this might not apply to your state, but where we work, we're allowed to record our pretext calls so that that information can be used to train our employees on how to market our service to our customers. You know, very interestingly, right before I gave the talk about, that I now call Break the Tie, but I gave that talk and was right after the examiner panel. Well, the day before that at that conference, they were talking about how we need to realize it's the bank's responsibility to let our customers know what services we provide. That if we don't, FinTech's going to take those services from us and then come back and give us less of a cut. Blah, blah, blah. Well, our employees need to let our customers know what service we provide as a community-based bank, and it's first and foremost security. Not mobile banking, secure mobile banking. Not, P2P, secure, safe, P2P. We're in the business of safety. But I have clients that will tell you that when we started doing the pretext calling, it was like no before on steroids. All of their scores improved. The fish me clicks were down in this particular banker's case. The password file analysis scores were better. The comprehension scores were up. And by the way, one of the giveaways we have for this talk is a comprehension exercise. If you have a culture where management's more than happy to fill out a quiz proving that they learned what you were hoping they learned, you have the right culture. You are ready to break the tie. You might already be breaking the tie. But the main thing also that pretext calling does is it helps people understand the why. Not just our employees, but more importantly, our customers. Now, if we want to just talk about the threats themselves, the blind pretext calling threat is the one that really is a black swan threat. At a different conference than the one I witnessed the examiner panel at, I listened to a really good pen tester give a talk, and someone had raised their hand. It was after I gave a talk on Zero Trust, and they were like, we're going to start segmenting our network and even start implementing some microsegments and that sort of thing. And doesn't that blah, 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 in terms of what it does to pen testing. And the pen tester, there was a little bit of back and forth, but the pen tester finally ended up saying, well, sir, just so you know, what we've found is it's a lot easier to just keep calling the client until we get that information. We can get it. That's the blind pretext call. It's often part of an orchestrated attack. The black swan nature of a blind pretext call is that it's part of an orchestrated attack. The beauty of having a good pretext calling defense is that that type of a call in an organization that has a good security culture where employees aren't nervous about reporting that they just made a mistake and violated a policy and gave out information to somebody that didn't know their own social security number or whatever. Well, in those kinds of organizations, that pretext call becomes active threat intelligence. That lets us know that, hey, there might be an APT on our network. Let's heighten our awareness. we've seen on a regular basis, on way too often of a basis, malware ending up on a network because an upset customer called a bank employee and asked them to go visit a website. That's another example of a blind pretext call. Meanwhile, the semi-blind call is the one that your marketing people should be aware of. Marketing should know that on a regular basis, we implement drip marketing. Now, marketing will tell you what drip marketing is. Drip marketing is where you just keep putting out the same message over and over and over again. Eventually, people will believe that message. Unfortunately, most organizations are kind of putting out the wrong message in their drip marketing, and banks are not above this. Unfortunately, banks are leaking account balances on a regular basis, which is a very negative message. We are telling our customers very regularly, we don't protect your account balance. That's not the message we want. We want our customers, and just so you know, one of the big things we have right now, right, is the fragmentation of financial information. Our customers went out and, signed up for 40 different apps, and they're starting to realize that, hey, I can't handle all the, complexity of 40 different ways to look at my finances. I need to consolidate. And they're starting to look at who they should consolidate to. And I believe as they get older, as they get more affluent, they might want to consolidate to the safe place. And so to me, the drip marketing message that we should be providing to our customer is not, we don't protect your account balance. It's, for your protection, we exist. For your protection, we are a bank. Our primary service is safety. So let's kind of listen so that you kind of fully understand what I mean by a pretext calling test. This is actually the journal that we provide, or it's an excerpt from the journal. Obviously, we had to sanitize this. And so, the easiest way to sanitize it is just take one of our retorted calls and then, beep out anything you didn't want to hear. But what that have caused was a very ineffective way of communicating this stuff to people in a talk, because it's hard to follow along when every other word is a beep. And so instead, we just kind of simulated some pretext. And by the way, when the person in charge of this gave it to me, he pointed out that, hey, we're pretext callers, not actors. And so you judge as you watch this movie. I think they still did a pretty good job, but here's the first example of what a pretext call sounds like.
Thanks for calling the First Bank of Nowhere. This is Nate.
Hi, Nate. I need the balance on my checking account.
What was the name on your account and your account number?
Tim Burton. Account number is 123456.
All right, I need to ask one more question here. What was your mother's maiden name?
Miller.
The balance is $2,352.27.
Hey, thank you.
Now, unfortunately, we run into this kind of pretext call on a very regular basis. We call this the brand new bank, right? They will very often look at what we're recommending they should do to, enforce confidentiality one at a time on our customers. And they decide, hey, you know what, let's just kind of, lighten this up a little bit. A little bit of looks like an overkill or whatever. And so, the employee here, he thought as long as he asked for a mother's maiden name, hey, that's a pretty good thing to confirm that, well, you can get that on Facebook. And so that kind of just takes us to the first, thing we've got going on here. This happens on a very regular basis in banks. And most people understand that it must be an overkill to ask an out-of-wallet question because they see security as the opposite of productivity. But banks see security, or they should at least see security, as a service that they provide. if we don't start realizing what separates us from fintech, we might very well prove the people that have been prognosticating about the demise of banks right. I still don't think we will, because fortunately our customers see us as being safe. Fortunately, fintech sees us as being safe. They realize that the amount of money and time and complexity and hassles that we go through to be safe is what they want to avoid, or they can't make a buck. And so that's why they're still relying on us for that account balance. They aren't signing up to get a banking license. They would have to be safe. And I mean, the thing we got to realize is that this going overboard, supposedly, that out-of-wallet questions might cause someone to think we're doing, is something our lucrative customers would like us to do, because they've got money to protect. They've got information they need to keep confidential, and they're looking for the safest place to do that. And think about it. Most of our lucrative customers are the elderly. They have big account balances. They have big trust balances or whatever. The critical infrastructure organizations we deal with, they are usually our lucrative customers. You want to talk about what the Russians are going to do? In my opinion, the whole notion of assume breach, the zero trust paradigm of acting as if we've already been breached, that really applies to our American businesses, because they probably have already been breached. Can you say zombie? Because to me, what the Russians could do is cause the zombies to rise, the APTs, the advanced persistent threats. And 99% of the people that lost data during the pandemic are at risk during a nation-state attack. They want us to protect them. And they're usually our more lucrative customers. Bill 2K, on the other hand, forget all the expense that he causes by us having to become unproductive because we're, breathing under our breath that, he's a jerk or whatever, right? Bill 2K is not usually a lucrative customer. There's a reason why he doesn't care about his identity. He doesn't really have much associated with it, usually. Now, none of this, of course, applies in every case, but for the most part, this is a risk assessment we did a long time ago, back when we were, as banks, trying to justify to our board that security was something we ought to take seriously. And so this particular bank, they were starting to take proposals for their fiducia audits, because it was the first time they had to do one. So that tells me that they were just about ready to break that billion-dollar banking point. And we ended up realizing that, hey, phishing's kind of important. Pretext calling is more important, because it would be part of an orchestrated attack. And this bank was really concerned about the orchestrated attack. It's what we called it back then. Let's show you a phishing vector that has really amazing penetration. Our pretext callers are going to probably be a little bit irritated. I'm showing you this because if you're watching this movie, you might not fall victim to this, and it's the IT people that we take this to. And when I gave that talk, and by the way, I gave that talk by way of, trying to peg the time. I gave that talk in mid-April of 2022. And when I gave that talk, I was told, hey, tell them that the first time we do this is usually about 75% penetration. It's aimed at IT people, so that's kind of wakes them up. But when I told my team I was going to turn that talk into a movie with a new title, Break the Tie, I had asked, are we doing any phone phishing? And they said yes. I said, how many? Get 100% of the 6 people we applied to phone phish to failed the last time we did it. This thing works. So This starts with us sending an email message to an unsuspecting IT person, one at a time, every person in the IT department. And as you can see, it's a typical phishing message. I mean, the red flags are there, but they're, just one of many different phishing messages we get on a regular basis, right? And so we need to get the IT person to notice this phish and really to go out to the website we have stood up for them. So let's listen to see how that goes. Again, here's the journal, here's the call.
First Bank of Nowhere, this is Sophia. How can I help you?
Hello, I need to speak to Joe ISO.
1 minute, please.
This is Joe.
Hi, Joe. My name is Lex, and I'm calling about an email sent earlier in the day from our company, PickRights. Have you had a chance to see that?
I have not. Just a second. Okay, I see it.
Have you seen the page in question? There's an image on it that belongs to our client. It seems that your bank has benefited from its use for at least 2 years.
So who are you?
PickRights. We enforce copyright agreements on behalf of digital artists. Usually a company like yours ends up accidentally using pictures that you think is clip art. We help everybody sort that out.
I'm there right now. Which picture are we talking about?
It's the laptop in the upper right corner of the web page. It actually belongs to Acme Graphics from San Francisco.
Whoa, I'm totally sorry about that. We worked with an agency about 3 years ago on the site. I wonder if they realize they're using copyrighted material.
Yeah, we hear that a lot. If you could share the name of the agency, it would make my job a lot easier.
Well, I probably shouldn't. I haven't done what we bankers call authentication yet. It's a pain in the butt, but I guess the regulators require it.
Oh, no worries. But would you be able to reply to that message, either confirming that you can bring that image down in 14 days, or be willing to work out a deal with us?
Sure, we can have it down in 14 days. I'll confirm that and then reply.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
So why don't we start drilling down on what we mean by the, subject of out-of-wallet questions. What are out-of-wallet questions? Well, they're the primary control we can use to defend against pretext calling. They're not actually the most effective control. The most effective control is just saying, hey, we don't offer information over the phone. You got to come into the branch. But that kind of belies the fact that the number one digital service, the number one digital channel that community-based banks and credit unions provide to their customers, due to recent surveys that I've seen, is telephone banking. They love that they can call up. Now I'm talking about the camera, it's all punch, digital, you press buttons and answer questions and stuff like that, using your phone. But that's the number one form of digital channels that our customers like to use. And so asking them to come into the branch is probably not the best control. Calling people back at the number that we have on file, not a number that they are offering us, right? It has to be a number that we have on file. That's probably the second safest control. But it can still also be maybe not as convenient as coming into the branch, but unfortunately people's phone numbers are changing all the time, or they might not have their phone number with them, or they might have given us their work number and they only have their cell with them or whatever. So we could use passphrases, and a lot of our clients are using passphrases now. The customers that engage with that really enjoy that, but the problem with passphrase is that A, getting all of our customers to give us one, and then B, even when they do give us a passphrase, very often they don't remember what passphrase they gave us, and then we have to revert to using what we call out-of-wallet questions. And I don't expect you to abbreviate it, OOWQ, but I need to in order to make sure that my titles fit across the screen. So if you see OOWQ, that's what I'm talking about there. So an out-of-wallet question is a question that you can't find in a wallet, right? And that original guidance, that supplement, 2011, when that guidance was published, I have to say that we were all like excited and high-fiving ourselves because we were already concerned about pretext calling as an attack vector. We've seen it in incidents. Remember, our company watches networks, and we've seen people leverage the pretext call to get information they shouldn't use, and that was part of a breach timeline a few times. And so when we saw the federal government put what we had been calling out-of-pocket questions into the guidance, we were like both, elated and also a little bit confused. And then, we realized that, hey, men and women have wallets, so it's, we thought maybe out of pocket. We were calling it that because we didn't want to be chauvinistic or sexist or whatever. But it turns out that, the federal government, they've got all kinds of people making sure that out of wallet questions is a sufficient name. But it's not just about the wallet, okay? Especially nowadays. But even back, in 2008, when social media started rising as ugly head, we started realizing that you got to ask questions that the answer can't be found not only in a wallet, but also on social media. And nowadays, if we're good, we should be asking questions. We're asking questions that the answers can't be found on the dark web. And so what do I mean by if we're good? Well, what I mean by if we're good is that we've learned how to use the information in the computer, the information we have on our screen, which is all different depending on what kind of services our customers might be relying on us for. But if we're good, we're looking for the current information, not the information that might be on the dark web. And it varies, again, from one type of customer to the next. And, the fortunate part of this is that in order for our employees to ask the right out-of-wallet question, they need to learn what kind of services our customers are using, which is part of what I heard in that talk the day before my talk, that, hey, we need to start learning our customers' services so that we can recommend services that we know they're already interested in, that they're not using from us. And so the out-of-wallet question involves that. I mean, heaven forbid our employees are going to learn how to ask, well, what kind of services are you using with our bank now? I've got to ask peculiar questions for your protection. And by the way, I don't know if you noticed, I said the words for your protection on purpose. Information that can be found in a wallet or social media, if you're asking that information, it's just to get the ball rolling. I'm not saying that, obviously we need to ask the account number, but it's not an out-of-wallet question. If we're asking the account number, it's just to help us ask the out-of-wallet questions. And how to ask the out-of-wallet questions is not easy. It's a lot easier for someone like me to stand here telling you how important they are and how to ask them than it is to be the person who's actually asking those questions. But they always should start with three important words. I call them three little words. One of them is not really so little, but for your protection. It's why banks exist. It's the service we're in. Let's start breaking the tie by drip marketing for your protection to our customers. As we work through the process of learning about the customer so that we can ask the right out-of-wallet question, we should be making sure that the customer gets the big why. Why are we asking you these questions? For your protection. We need to kind of slow down. Heaven forbid, we might have to develop a little bit of a relationship with the caller so that we can help them answer questions that we're asking for one purpose and one purpose alone: for your protection. If we're asking questions that are easy to answer, in this case metaphorically because the answer is right in the question, then we are not going to stop pretext callers, or worse, bad actors or nosy neighbors or malicious family members or whatever from getting the information that they're after. Let's hear how that looks.
First Bank of Nowhere. This is Sophia. How can I help you?
Hello, I need the balance on my checking account.
What is your account number?
123456.
And what is your social security number?
907 298962.
It's now 901-159605.
Can you say that again?
901-159605.
No, and the last time I called you guys, you still had the wrong number on file.
Well, your account balance is at $1,240.59. I'll correct your social security number. What was it again?
My social security number is 907 298962. Thanks.
Up until now, every one of the journals that you've seen have been right out of real pretext calls. That happens a lot. Just so you know, very often we're waking up people on a Saturday morning because pretext calls work really good when your, employees' awareness are not activated. So go figure. We're making those calls on Saturday morning, and we actually have a bank president who was identified as the contact person, and we live in Indiana where the time zone's kind of whacked out here, and so you never really know what time zone you're calling. And so we made this call at 8:30 in the morning. Turned out to be 7:30 in the morning on that bank president's clock. We woke him up at 7:30 in the morning. He wasn't too thrilled about that because he had to get a hold of people and make sure that we got the right social security number back in the account. This is what we call audit risk. Yes, this does happen. Your accounting firm has audit controls in place to make sure that when this does happen, nobody gets hurt. Now, there's also another problem where your employee might be thinking about it and call up a customer directly. This is why we really want you to teach your employees broadcast awareness before we start doing the pretext calling, and thankfully most banks have already done that. What do we mean by broadcast awareness? That's what we do when we become suspicious. Our employees really should get with their supervisors first. Supervisors are all aware of the fact that we're doing this kind of testing, and therefore we usually thwart that. One time in the 12 years or so that we've been doing semi-blind calls, it's really more like 14 or 15 years, one time did a customer actually get called. When that customer was explained what was happening and why it was happening, the customer felt like, wow, you guys really do have my back. We turned a lemon into lemonade. The drip went out as, wow, this bank really bends over backwards to protect me, instead of they don't protect my account balance. Fast forward about, 3 or 4 months, and I'm standing in line in a hotel getting ready for a big conference to start, and the bank president yells at me, Dan, across the hotel lobby. He's like, you saved our ass. Well, I'm kind of liking that. Everybody else in the hotel lobby looked to see who it was that saved this bank president's ass, and then the bank president explained how about 3 or 4 weeks after the pretext calling test was concluded, someone tried to transfer $100,000 incorrectly, maliciously out of an account, but because of the pretext calling engagement, that bank was aware, their awareness was activated, they thwarted that transfer, and this bank helped advertise our services to everybody that was standing in that lobby, because they realized that not only was the pain in the butt they went through that Saturday morning worth it, but their employees ended up feeling like, wow, man, for your protection. But we continued to pretext call that bank, and we continued to train that bank, and we found that even though they did thwart that $100,000, there were still some nuances they needed to work on, such as it was only a 2-location bank. And so he asked, well, what location did you, open your account in? Well, gosh, that means that I can call the next branch knowing, and there's a good chance I might guess the answer right anyway, et cetera, right? So there's a lot of bad questions that we could ask that we need to make sure when we're explaining the why, when we're going over this with our employees, when Mark Edding realizes this is actually a good thing, not a bad thing, this is turning the opposite of productivity into drip marketing about what our primary service is, which is for your protection. Over time, our employees get really well activated. Our employees understand all the nuances of their customer services because they learn what customers need to have protected, which is usually the answers to out-of-wallet questions. Let's hear it again.
Thanks for calling First Bank of Nowhere. This is Nate speaking.
Hi, Nate. I need the balance on my checking account.
What's your account number?
It's 123456.
Do you remember when your last deposit was?
It was last Friday.
Do you remember the amount?
Oh, I don't. My wife reconciles all our accounts. I'm just making sure we don't overdraft anything.
No worries. Your account's fine. The balance is $685.12.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Once again, this was directly out of a journal. This particular character represents Mark Edding, the people that don't want to inconvenience their customers, by golly, because they don't have the why. Mark Edding didn't understand why he should be asking out-of-wallet questions. He knew to ask the question. He even asked the question. But upon the pretext caller not knowing the answer, he just went ahead and coughed up the balance anyway, drip marketing in the wrong direction, and it was the marketing guy that did it. But this helps us understand how important the why is, not only in out-of-wallet questions, but in any of the training that we provide to our customers, especially the cybersecurity training, because we have people, we have them doing the metaphorical equivalent of taking their shoes off in the airport. If they understand why, they might not like it still, but they'll cooperate with it. And I tell you, if Mark Edding in your bank understands why, he will start helping us learn the best way to teach our employees how to get to know our customers enough to protect them when someone calls asking for information on them. Now, Joe and Jane here, they're wondering, why does Mark Edding not follow procedure? And they think it's a problem with Mark Edding. But I'm sorry, Joe and Jane, you are cybersecurity heroes to me, superheroes. But you didn't give Mark the why. He doesn't understand why he has to ask dumb questions like this. And so he bypasses the control in the name of customer service. He misses on providing the primary customer service, safety. Let's give that another try.
Thanks for calling First Bank of Nowhere. This is Nate.
Hi, Nate. I need the balance on my checking account.
For your protection, I'll need to ask you a few questions to verify who I'm speaking with. Do you remember what your account number is?
Yeah, it's 123456.
And do you know when the last deposit was?
Last Friday.
You don't happen to know what the amount of that deposit was?
No, I don't. My wife reconciles our account. I just wanted to make sure we weren't overdrafting anything.
Do you know where the deposit comes from?
Yeah, it comes from LexisNexis.
I see you wrote a check for more than $1,000. Can you say who that check was written to?
You talking about the I think $1,200 check written to Mary Maids?
Yeah, that's the one. Your balance is $23.
Ah, perfect. Thank you.
Hey, the superheroes are a little bit happy, at least, that Nate here has learned how to ask the out-of-wallet question and that he's not going to just give out the balance. But we're still missing a big part of this, okay? Because Nate really only said for your protection once. And so Mark Edding, once he gets the big why, once he realizes what we're doing here, he's probably going to agree with me that, hey, we should say for your protection at least twice in every, transaction that requires us to follow procedures for the customer's protection. And I'm not just talking about out-of-wallet questions. I'm talking about when the customer calls up complaining because they have to change their password. The first words out of our mouth should be for your protection. It's why we exist. Now, I don't know if you should say it's why we exist, but for your protection. 3 little words. That's what turns us into cybersecurity superheroes. Now, especially if we don't use the 3 little words enough, our customers are going to start getting frustrated. And I know that Mark Edding does not like that. Security is the opposite of productivity, he says. Well, we're not giving enough, for your protection. But sometimes we're not going to be able to find the right question, especially when it's a pretext caller calling. We don't have the right answers. And so if you can't find the right question, there's 2 last resort responses. The first one is to try to call the customer back at the phone number that the bank has on file. And then finally, we really should escalate to our supervisor, who will then maybe try to ask and find some other out-of-wallet questions, but ultimately has the authority, has been empowered to, understands it's why we exist. Sometimes security is the opposite of productivity. Sometimes the customer's just going to have to come into the branch. Sometimes the customer is a pretext caller. And let's hope to God never, but sometimes the caller might be an advanced persistent threat.
Thanks for calling First Bank of Nowhere. This is Sophia. How can I help you?
Hi, Sophia. I needed the balance on my checking account.
For your protection, I will need to ask you a few questions to verify who I am speaking with. What's your account number?
My account number is 123456.
And when was the last deposit?
Last Friday.
How much was it for?
I honestly don't know. My wife reconciles the account.
Do you know where the deposit comes from?
Yes, Flora Plumbing.
I see here that you wrote a check for more than 1,000 in the past week. Can you say who it was to?
Let's see. Are you talking about the $1,500 check to Best Buy?
No, that was from a couple weeks ago. I'm talking about the check written this past week.
My wife wrote that one to some lady. I just can't remember her name.
Sir, as you can tell, I'm having a hard time confirming your identity. For your protection, can I call you back at the phone number listed on file?
Yeah, can you tell me which phone number you have?
We're not allowed to give you that information.
Well, my cell number is 937-361-0725.
No, that's not the number we have on file. Would you mind coming into the branch with your ID to get your account information?
I can come in today. How late are you open?
We're open until 5.
Now this pretext call, and by the way, we're still looking at the sanitized real journal here. Okay, and this particular pretext call, Personnel's asking for a high five there. I'll give her a high five. I feel like she did a lot better, but I would like to say that, I feel like it's better if you're going to ask the customer to come into the branch that you first escalate to your supervisor and have your supervisor re-explain, hey, this is for your protection. We're really looking for a question that we can ask that has current information that, that the bad guy wouldn't have, that somebody who shouldn't have access to your information wouldn't have. And if we can't get that, then we're going to have you come into the branch. It's better to the customer if the supervisor is saying that. Now, personnel, or it was really Sophia that did that pretext call. I just want you to know that, I mean, she could have used for your protection a little bit more up here. The customer didn't seem to be getting frustrated, but most of our customers would be unless we're driving that point home. What really kills me is how people are like, well, I've already said for your protection twice. Okay, so are you saying then that if the radio station calls us up and says, hey, I know you only paid for 2 30-second commercials, but we can do a free one. Are you going to say, no, we don't want our customers to hear that message 3 times? No. So let's drip market for your protection on our customers every time we have to explain a policy or procedure that's causing them a little bit of inconvenience, or in some cases, a lot of inconvenience. Let's make sure they understand it's because it's the service that we provide. We will see in the journals a lot of times where the employee does everything right and our pretext caller gives it one last crack and is able to talk the employee out of following procedure. And the pretext callers are good at sounding frustrated, even though they're not. They realize that, hey, this is just a test, right? But once they start sounding frustrated, they can press that button on personnel who prioritizes politeness just a little bit ahead of following policy. Let's go ahead and listen to this next pretext call here. This is a let me start that over. This is it's a different twist on the end of the last call.
That's not the number we have on file. Could you possibly visit a branch or your ID to get your account information?
Really? You actually want me to come into a branch?
I'm sorry, sir, but for your protection, we need to know who you are before we can provide confidential information.
Well, why do you even have a phone then? If I can't call the bank to get information, what good are you?
I'm sorry, sir. Would you like to talk to my supervisor?
No, but if I have to come into the branch, I will be doing so to close my account.
Bill 2K, he's going to come in and close his account that maybe has a whole whopping, $100 in it or 150 or whatever. And, he might come in and close his account that has a whole whopping $150,000 in it. But think about how much money we're spending to protect our customers. We might lose a customer because that customer doesn't understand our service. But just so you know, before I gave this talk, called up a couple of our clients and wanted to know, hey, can I tell the audience that the likelihood of you actually losing a customer over this is far less than the likelihood of you losing a customer over the account balance being breached. And both of my customers, when I asked them that question, they thought about it a little bit and they basically said, we really don't worry too much about losing customers that are mad because they're not following procedure. We're more worried about the customers that are being abused. And both of them felt like the out-of-wallet question was thwarting domestic abuse more than any kind of APTs or anything like that. So I found that to be kind of interesting. Now, I feel like we're probably getting into the realm where these aren't really journal, that we're making stuff up here because we want to show you what a good pretext call looks like. Now, having said that, I believe this first one, when I'm done, I'm going to be asking you, hey, which metaphorical character of the typical bank? Remember that first slide I went over that had personnel, everybody from personnel through to hacker guy in it. Remember that? Bill 2K on the way left, Joe and Jane ISO on the right. They're right, separating hacker guy from the rest of the bank. Which one of those characters do you think is the employee in this pretext call?
Thanks for calling the First Bank of Nowhere. How may I help you?
Hi, I need the balance on my checking account.
What's your account number?
My account number is 123456.
And what was the name on the account?
My name is Tim Burton.
What's the last four digits of your social security number there, Tim?
I don't have my card on me.
You wouldn't by know that the amount of your last deposit, would you?
What?
Your last deposit.
Hmm.
You wouldn't happen to know your birth date, would you?
Yeah, my birth date is January 15th, 1975.
And how about your address?
My address is 123 Fake Street.
Your account balance is $1,240.12.
Great. Thanks for your help.
So, this pretext call leverages, it's almost like a chess tactic if you ask me, but it's a 1-2 punch where when somebody states, and they don't use the words for your protection, by the way, a question, the answer is, what? And then silence. What happens to the employee? The employee becomes weak and starts to worry that maybe he or she is being impolite because the employee doesn't have the why. The employee doesn't realize that our service is security. Now, which employee do you think this one is? Is this marketing? Is this personnel? Is this Joan Department? To me, we've hired somebody who doesn't understand that we're in the business of for your protection. That person didn't use the words for your protection at all, if I remember right. That person doesn't understand why the bank is in business. And that person prioritized politeness over following procedure. And we get this a lot, where employees just simply don't follow procedure. As a matter of fact, when we train our pretext callers, when we train our physical breach testers, we stress to them that this is not on you, this is on them. All you have to do is call up or show up and make a few statements, and then it's up to them. Do they follow procedure or not? If they don't follow procedure, we win. And unfortunately, an APT could win. If they do follow procedure, then we lose. Or really, the bank wins, the customer wins, the service of safety wins. The other thing that we're starting to hear from those customers that I called is that because they've gone through great steps to establish the right culture, a self-reporting culture where the employee is not nervous about going into their supervisor's office and say, I think I just screwed up. I think I failed to follow procedure. I think I gave out wrong information. I think I clicked on the link. With the pretext call, more than a fish, we might have active threat intelligence. It might help us understand something about an orchestrated attack that was completely off of our radar. Let's see how Joan Department, the multitasker, does. By the way, this is going to start right where we're, the customer is saying his name is Tim Burton.
My name is Tim Burton.
And what is the passphrase for the account?
I remember setting that up, but I can't recall it. There's too many things to remember these days.
Oh, that's okay. We have additional questions we can ask. What's the last four digits of your social security number?
I don't have my card on me.
You don't know the last four digits of your social security number?
No, I never memorized it.
Okay, so what was the last transaction on this account?
I don't know. That's why I'm calling, to make sure I don't overdraft my account.
Do you remember the last place you used your debit card?
I think it was at the gas station.
Do you know the check number you last used on this account?
No, I do not have my checkbook.
All right, so do you have a direct deposit?
I do.
And how much is the direct deposit?
I think it's about 3,100 every other Friday.
Where does the direct deposit come from?
My place of work.
And where is that?
Why do you need to know all this information? I gave you my account number.
Sir, I'm sorry, but for your protection, I need to verify who I'm speaking with before I can give any account information over the phone.
Whatever.
Sir, since I couldn't verify you, could you please come into a branch to get your account balance? You'll need to bring a photo ID.
Sure, I'll be in later today.
Okay, thanks so much.
What's important here is that Joan finally started using it for your protection. She would have started using that more up here a little bit more. Once again, it's not going to hurt us to say for your protection 2 or 3, 4, as many times as it takes. The customer wouldn't maybe seem as frustrated at the end. We need to realize, we need to make sure our employees understand that the why is security, not politeness. I mean, don't get me wrong, we need to be polite. I felt like Joan was starting to get a little bit suspicious there when she started asking how the customer wouldn't remember the social security number. We get that a lot. But suffice it to say, Joan's job is to politely explain the procedure and help the customer get the big why. It's for their protection. Let's try that a different way. Now, obviously, we're here with this one. This is really a simulated pretext call. It's not directly out of a journal. And we're starting in the middle of the last call here.
Where does the direct deposit come from?
My place of work.
And where is that?
The Air Force.
Oh, thanks for your service. But I was afraid of that. Sir, for your protection, I'm sorry, but that's not going to make a good authentication question.
A what?
Authentication question.
You mean a way to prove I am who I say I am? Okay, I get it.
Let me try a multiple choice question. I see you have a loan on file. Is it for a Volkswagen, a Cadillac, or a Corvette?
Ma'am, are you looking at the right file? My auto loan is for a Dodge Durango.
Oh, good. That's exactly what we have on file, sir. Again, I apologize for the inconvenience.
Hey, in these times, I get it.
I can go ahead and answer your questions now, but perhaps next time you're in the branch for your protection, you can set up a passcode to have on file so that we don't have to go through this again.
Oh, great. Like I really need another thing to remember.
Yes, that's one of the downfalls of technology these days. Your balance is $6.66.
Yikes. Okay, thanks.
So, in this case, boy, Jane did a much better job. I feel like, she still, again, could have, maybe said for your protection, but she said it there. But then she's also explaining the why, right? She was a lot more polite than she had in the first call, but she was explaining the why. Now, let's face it, it probably didn't, we're trying to work under a time constraint here, but it probably would have taken a little bit more before the customer ended up saying, you mean, but that's what my clients are telling me is that the customers, once they eventually get it, then they cooperate with it so totally. And, marketing in your bank, your marketing person will tell you that if a customer is upset, they're going to tell 10 people. And so what we've done is we've taken a customer telling 10 people that they just disclosed my account balance to that customer possibly telling a few people, probably less than 10, that, wow, that bank really, has their act together. They're there for your protection. But, with all that, I feel like, Joan really should be, happy about her performance here. She's done a much better job. The customer now gets it and, understands the big why. And, Joan did a good job of protecting that customer. So we realize that this is a lot easier said than done. We believe that this is how you turn that whole notion of when, the good guys practice cybersecurity, they're shooting for a tie. We've got to do this anyway. And obviously they took my teeth from a guidance perspective out when they released a new authentication guidance. But if we do not respond to the pretext calling threat, A, we're helping the APTs, B, we're sending the wrong message to our customers on a drip basis, regular drip, drip, drip of they don't protect my account balance. And again, banks are safe. FinTech is not. And our customers should be warned about the dangers of pretext calling. So, by way of finishing up, how do we teach pretext calling? Well, it kind of goes back to the habits and disciplines that I was talking about in that 7th trend in my Magnificent 7 article. We need to develop policy language. We've got some language available in the deliverables that come with this webinar and this movie when it's in movie format. You'll need to go over to journals. Once again, if you can get your pretext callers to actually record their pretext calls, that makes very good training material. If you have a system set up where you can record calls, that makes the best way of providing that feedback and motivating people, helping people understand not only the big why are we doing this, but also helping them understand how to ask those questions. And then we really recommend that you engage with your audit firm to perform pretext calling all year long. If you have 5 branches, then maybe you do 20 calls a year and spread them out, sprinkle them out throughout the whole year. You can use pretext calling to gauge your incident response and that broadcast awareness to make sure that we're doing a good job of that. That policy language, as well as the guidances that I referred to before, as well as that comprehension exercise, are all available on this website here. But then, by way of how to train our employees, there's 2 movies that are available out there. There's a 45-minute movie and there's a 90-minute movie. We recommend that the people that, fail a pretext call the first time, they need to take the 45-minute movie. The people that fail it the second time, maybe they should take the 90-minute movie. There's a lot of role playing in the movies. But again, really, if you really want to get big bang for the buck, review those recorded calls. And again, that whole ongoing awareness training, the whole ongoing activation nature of the ongoing pretext call, the year-long pretext calling engagement is definitely worth the money. For some reason, our employees will, click on a link if they think it's a bad guy on the other side, but if they think it's a know before test, they stay as far away from that link as they get. There's the place you can go to get to those movies. The movies will actually go over a lot of what I've already went over in this movie, the threats, what are good out-of-wallet questions, how to go about, asking them, the do's and don'ts. And then again, there's a lot of role-playing in those movies. Once again, the policy language, the guidance, the comprehension exercises are available on that website as well. So, by way of summarizing, if you want to break the tie, consider implementing a drip marketing program where your customers are continually and constantly reminded that the reason why they use your services is for their protection. Start by creating a good policy and a procedure surrounding authenticating telephone callers, and then remind them that it's also about mitigating risk, not just improving our reputation. And what I mean by that is the advanced persistent threat, right? So by doing a better job of authenticating telephone callers, not only are we addressing the advanced persistent threat, but we're also breaking the tie. Make sure that they understand that training is a good control. It's what separates community-based banks from the federal government or those big companies that whenever you call them, you're going to be spending at least a half hour to an hour and a half on the phone. Try role playing, but the recorded calls I feel like work better than the role plays. Be sure to provide feedback from those tests. Send people to the movies if they're failing those tests. And by the way, probably most importantly, and whether you adopt these practices or not, implement a culture where people feel, good and okay and comfortable coming in and explaining that I just clicked on the link, or, wow, somebody called up and wanted information and didn't know their social security number and I gave it to them anyway. or whatever. And by the way, it shouldn't just be about, self-reporting is what we call that. It should also be about broadcast awareness. If we do a good job of thwarting the person that calls and doesn't even know their own Social Security number and doesn't have any answers to any out-of-wallet questions, maybe we should let the rest of the organization know in the form of broadcast awareness that, hey, somebody's calling asking for information and they don't even know their own Social Security number. Now, I realize that very often you do run into real life people that don't know their own Social Security number, but your tellers are wise enough to know when it's truly somebody that doesn't know their Social Security number and it's somebody who also can't answer any of the other out-of-wallet questions. That's the key. The key is saying over and over again, for your protection, we need you to help us answer these questions. The legitimate customers, once that program has been in place for a while, will come to the phone call ready to answer those questions. But what we found, and you probably see this in your phishing testing as well, the pretext calling approach and really, trying to establish that drip marketing program really helps foster that self-reporting environment. And let's face it, a good security culture, a good self-reporting culture is the culture where when something does happen bad, we're able to respond to it quickly. So I hope you now know how to break the tie. Let's face it, if every time we played chess we were going for a stalemate, chess wouldn't be as fun. And likewise with cybersecurity. So let's break that tie. Let's help our customers understand why they should consolidate all their various financial apps to your mobile banking app. Let's remember that breaking the tie requires awareness. And let's never forget, awareness is 9/11ths of the battle. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us and have a great day.